Folks, there's a big update on the fourth stimulus check. Joe Biden has unveiled a new relief package that could charge and change the amount of the fourth stimulus payment. Some seniors could actually be receiving a larger check as well. Social Security is facing a financial shortfall. In the coming years, it expects to spend more on benefits than what it takes in. This is thanks to the large workforce of baby boomers exiting the workforce. However, Social Security has trust funds it can tap to make up its revenue shortfalls. But once those trust funds are depleted, benefit cuts will be on the table unless lawmakers manage to come up with a fix. And now there are several different solutions that have been introduced along those lines. And one is to raise full retirement age, which is known as FRA. This is when filers are entitled to their monthly benefits without a reduction. Currently, full retirement age is 67 for anyone born in 1960 or later, but lawmakers have suggested pushing it back to 68. According to the University of Maryland's program for public consultation, doing so could eliminate 14% of Social Security's projected shortfall. But while raising full retirement age may be a good way to prevent future benefit cuts, it can make a lot of people unhappy by forcing them to delay their retirement plans. And it's a reasonable idea that lawmakers are apt to consider, and namely because life expectancies have increased since FRA was established, and so asking people to delay retirement by a year doesn't read like such a ludicrous thing. In fact, Social Security recipients are allowed to claim benefits before FRA as early as age 62. Filing before FRA means accepting a reduced benefit, but that's a penalty some seniors are willing to face if it means getting their money sooner and getting to retire when they want. But if you don't have much in the way of retirement savings and expect to be heavily dependent on Social Security during your senior years, then you may not be able to afford a lower benefit. And so in that case, you might have to delay your retirement by a year if FRA is moved back. And while it remains unclear whether Americans could see a fourth round of stimulus from the Fed government, homeowners throughout the United States could be eligible for additional financial aid under the Homeowner Assistance Fund. The purpose of the Homeowner Assistance Fund is to prevent mortgage delinquencies and defaults, foreclosures, and loss of utilities. Homeowners can use the funds to help pay for mortgage payments, homeowners insurance, and utility payments and other purposes. While Homeowner Assistance Funds are not the same as the 3 stimulus checks that were rolled out, they were allocated as part of the American Rescue Plan, and nearly $10 billion was set aside for the fund, so it's definitely going to help many people. Folks, President Biden has just announced that gas rebate cards for many Americans are available with the fourth stimulus check and Social Security benefits. Be sure to continue watching this video because you definitely don't want to miss out on it. Stimulus checks in 2020 and 2021 prevented the U.S. from entering a recession or maybe even a depression. Though due to the inflow of capital going to both people and businesses, inflation has risen and lawmakers are facing a dilemma. They have to determine if more direct relief will present somewhat of a chance to rising inflation, even more, or if it could help the U.S. curb inflation. Lawmakers are pushing for the latter as millions of more people continue to urge that Congress take more action. Stimulus checks and the $3 trillion in relief allegedly have contributed 3% in inflation by the end of 2021. The direct relief payment helped the bank accounts of millions of Americans, and if more relief is spent heavily on discretionary purchases that might make costs rise. According to the data from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, found that relief from the government prevented 11 million Americans from falling in poverty. The department reported that the most impactful programs for alleviating poverty was economic impact payments under the American Rescue Plan and unemployment compensation. Now, a tax policy center and a senior researcher found that a new round of checks would definitely help Americans dealing with inflation. She stated delivering some sort of cash benefit now would sort of protect them from the inflation that's happening around them. And a former presidential campaign candidate, Andrew Yang, said that stimulus checks are not to blame for inflation and that he's definitely pro-direct relief. Supporters of a fourth stimulus check have agreed that a quick, broad outpouring of cash would really ease the economic hardships caused by the crisis. And now, according to Fox, President Biden may resort to using emergency powers if oil companies don't increase output at their refineries. The letters come one day after Biden ordered the sale of another 45 million barrels of crude oil from the U.S. Strategic Oil Reserve. Biden's letters does not offer a timeline for when his administration will resort to emergency powers, threatening to only do so in the near term, and the oil companies have yet to publish a response to Biden's letter. The administration is touting airline standards it is proposing to adopt as a climate win, even though its technical documents say that the rule is not expected to cut.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome back to the committee. Chair Powell, it's good to see you again. I want to follow up on this issue of this imbalance between labor demand and supply, as you were just referring to. According to the latest figures from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there were 5.5 million more jobs in April than available workers. And so we have, as a result, an extremely competitive labor market and very strong wage growth. But inflation is even higher than wage growth, so that's wiping out worker gains and leaving a lot of folks with what amounts to a pay cut as they, at the same time, try to figure out how to pay for higher prices for gas and food. So let me ask you this, Chair Powell, with all of that in mind, what is the basis for the argument that wages are too high and that they need to come down in order to rein in inflation?
So it isn't that wages themselves are too high. It's that the rate of growth of wages is not consistent. And I'll explain this, not consistent with 2% inflation over time. So, of course, it's great when wages go up, and we want them to go up. We want people to get, strong wage increases. But at a certain point, wages become high enough that companies start raising prices, and you wind up getting high inflation. So if you just kind of reverse engineer what level of wage increases would be consistent with 2% inflation over the longer term, today's wage increases, if you look across the numbers of measures that we look at, they're significantly above that. Now, there's some evidence that they're flattening out. Particularly average hourly earnings, there's some evidence that measure of wages is flattening out so that it's no longer going up. So it's really not about reducing wages. It's just having a more sustainable pace of increases.
And what would you expect if wages started to stabilize, as you say, they stop increases? How long would you expect it to be before the prices that consumers are paying would start to go down?
So
are they ever going to go down?
It depends in. Prices don't have to go down for inflation to go down. So if prices remain at the same level, inflation goes to zero. But it depends on different businesses. In some parts of the service economy, labor costs are a very large portion of costs, and so you would think that gets passed through very quickly into prices. And so we would think we would
encourage you to move very quickly. As you know, the system is scheduled to go up next year. We had an earlier hearing in May in this committee, and Brookings Senior Fellow Aaron Klein, who's spent a lot of time monitoring this system, shared his concern that we weren't moving fast enough to hit that date and fully implement it. So I just want your commitment, Mr. Chairman, that you are focused on this and that it is a priority.
Very much so. We're very focused on doing it right and also on time, and that's next year.
Right, because it especially impacts, of course, people living paycheck to paycheck, right, who make a deposit in a bank but it doesn't clear, and then they get tagged with all sorts of overcharge fees and things like that. So I just, other countries that are a lot less advanced in terms of technology, the United States have figured this out, and we should be there now. I just want to turn to really the issue of the day, which is this challenge in navigating